The truth always finds the light. The words had barely left the judge's lips when the side doors of the Manhattan courthouse opened and Ethan Cole stepped inside, his polished shoes striking the marble in slow, measured clicks that echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling. Every head turned. Reporters lined the back rows with glowing tablets and poised pens, hungry for the custody hearing tied to the Cole Foundation fraud investigation. But Ethan's focus never touched the cameras. It stopped the instant he saw the boy. Small. Still. Maybe 8 years old. He sat in the witness chair wearing a navy blazer too formal for his size, his dark curls neat, his chin lifted with a composure no child should have needed to learn. Yet it wasn't the blazer or the stillness that made Ethan's breath catch. It was the eyes. Steel gray. His eyes. The same cold storm that stared back at him every morning in the mirror now lived in the face of a child he had never seen. For one suspended second, the courtroom disappeared. The whispering attorneys, the fluorescent lights, the low hum of the city beyond the windows, gone. All Ethan could hear was the pounding of his own pulse. The boy tightened his fingers around the wooden rail in front of him, thumb rubbing the edge in a precise, nervous rhythm Ethan had repeated through every merger, every hostile takeover, every quarterly earnings call since he was 25. A habit no one else in the world knew. No one except blood. Then Ethan saw her. Amara Brooks stood at the plaintiff's table in a tailored charcoal suit, one hand resting near a leather folder, her posture straight enough to split the room in half. 8 years had sharpened her. The softness he remembered from rainy walks downtown and late-night takeout in her Brooklyn apartment had transformed into something quieter, stronger, untouchable. Her deep brown skin glowed under the cold white courtroom lights, and her face gave him nothing, not anger, not grief, not triumph. Just control. The kind built from surviving without witnesses. Ethan's chest tightened harder. His mother's voice from years ago moved through his memory like poison wrapped in silk. She left, Ethan, took the money and vanished. She chose her future over you. He had believed it because grief had been easier than doubt. Because his mother, Vivian Cole, had always spoken with the authority of a woman who built empires from certainty. And now there she was, seated behind the defense line in a cream designer suit, pearls perfect at her throat, expression composed enough to fool anyone who didn't know how to look closer. But Ethan knew her. The faint twitch in her jaw betrayed her first crack. Judge Holloway adjusted his glasses and looked toward the witness stand. Noah Brooks, can you tell this court why your mother kept your identity private? The boy's small shoulders lifted with a breath that seemed far too old for him. His voice came out clear, calm, and devastating. Because Grandma said my dad could never know about me. The room shifted. A rustle of disbelief swept through the gallery like wind through dry leaves. Ethan's head turned slowly toward Vivian, every movement heavy with disbelief. Her lips parted, but for once, no polished answer came. Noah continued, his little fingers still pressed to the rail. She said if he found out, I'd ruin the company. She said Mom had to leave before I was born. The words landed harder than any accusation Ethan had ever faced in business. Across the aisle, Amara finally opened the leather folder in front of her. The sound of the clasp snapping loose cut through the silence like a blade. From inside, she withdrew a weathered envelope, its edges softened by time, and held it up for the court to see. Ethan recognized his mother's handwriting before the attorney even spoke. The old ache in his chest turned into something far worse. Not heartbreak. Recognition. Betrayal. Because in that single envelope was proof that the woman who had taught him loyalty had stolen 8 years of his son's life. And as Amara placed it on the evidence table beneath the white courtroom light, Ethan realized this hearing was never about corporate fraud at all. It was about the night his mother made the woman he loved disappear into the rain, carrying the child he should have known from the very first heartbeat. The envelope rested beneath the courtroom light like a heartbeat frozen in paper. Ethan could not pull his eyes away from it. His mother's handwriting curved across the front in the same elegant script that had once signed birthday cards, charity checks, and board approvals. Only now it looked different. Colder. Like every perfect letter had been. Sharpened into a weapon. Judge Holloway nodded for the clerk to pass it forward, and the attorney carefully removed the contents with gloved hands. First came a cashier's check made out to Amara Brooks for $250,000. then a one-way first-class ticket from New York to Seattle dated exactly 8 years and 3 months earlier. Finally, folded so many times the creases had nearly split, came a letter on Cole holding stationery. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face as the attorney began to read. Miss Brooks, you will leave the city tonight and sever all future contact with my son. This arrangement protects the Cole family, the company, and the child you are carrying. If you care for Ethan's future, you will never tell him. A murmur swept through the courtroom, louder this time, disbelief colliding with outrage. Reporters leaned forward, screens glowing brighter as fingers flew across keyboards. Vivian Cole sat motionless, but Ethan saw the tremor in the pearls at her throat where her pulse betrayed her calm. He had seen hostile investors break under less pressure, yet nothing in his life had prepared him for the collapse happening inside his own chest. He turned to Amara, searching her face for anger, for some trace of the pain this letter must have carved into her life. Instead, he found the same stillness, the same quiet dignity that had once made him fall in love with her when she was the only person in a crowded room who never cared about his last name. Why did you never come back? The question escaped him before he could stop it, low and rough enough that even the reporters nearest the aisle went silent. Amara's gaze shifted to him for the first time since the hearing began. Her eyes held exhaustion that had aged into strength. I did, she said softly. 3 months after Noah was born, I came back to Manhattan with him in my arms. Your mother's security team met me outside Cole Tower before I even reached the lobby. Ethan's stomach tightened. He could picture it too easily now. Winter wind slicing between the glass buildings. Amara holding an infant wrapped in a blue blanket. Hope carrying her farther than sleep ever could. She told me you were engaged. That the board had tied your future to a merger with the Whitmore family. She said if I loved you, I would disappear before I destroyed everything you had worked for. The words struck with brutal precision because they aligned perfectly with the memory Ethan had buried for years. The merger talks, the board pressure, the relentless push to protect the company image after his father's death. At the time, Vivian had called it strategic survival. Now he saw the cost in flesh and time, and the small boy still sitting alone in the witness chair. Noah looked from Amara to Ethan with solemn gray eyes, trying to piece together the adults who had shaped the edges of his life in silence. Mom kept every letter she wrote you, he said quietly. She never sent them because Grandma said you would hate us. Ethan's breath caught. Amara reached into the folder again, and this time laid down a bundle of unopened envelopes tied with a faded navy ribbon. Every one of them carried his name, Ethan Cole. The sight hollowed him out in a way no market loss or public scandal ever could. 8 years of first steps, fevers, birthdays, school awards, and questions about a father Noah had only known as a shadow. All of it sealed away by the woman who had claimed to protect him. Judge Holloway adjusted his glasses again, voice steady but heavy with implication. This court now understands the custody petition is not merely about corporate guardianship. It concerns deliberate concealment of paternity and coercive interference by a third party. The legal words echoed, but Ethan barely heard them. He was staring at Noah, at the way the boy sat too straight, too composed, carrying his silence like armor. Ethan had spent his life building an empire in steel and glass. Yet in this single moment, he understood that the most devastating loss was not financial. It was time. 8 years measured not in quarters or profits, but in missed bedtime stories, unanswered questions, and a son who had learned his father first as an absence. The silence after the judge's words felt heavier than the marble walls surrounding them. Ethan remained standing, unable to sit, unable to breathe normally, as the weight of 8 stolen years pressed into every corner of his mind. Across the room, Noah's small hand still rested on the witness rail, but now the boy's fingers had gone still, as if even he understood that something larger than the courtroom had just shifted. Judge Holloway looked toward Vivian Cole with the kind of measured restraint only years on the bench could teach. Mrs. Cole, do you deny authoring these letters and arranging Miss Brooks's departure while she was pregnant? Vivian lifted her chin, pearls catching the white light. For a moment she looked exactly like the woman Ethan had trusted his entire life, composed, immaculate, built from certainty. Then she answered in the same calm voice she used at shareholder meetings. I did what was necessary. The words struck the room harder than any denial could have. A wave of whispers rippled through the gallery. Reporters exchanged stunned glances, their screens already filling with headlines that would race across Manhattan before lunch. Ethan stared at his mother as if seeing her for the first time. Necessary. The word echoed against memories he had once mistaken for love. Every carefully arranged relationship. Every strategic dinner. Every woman his mother had approved of because she fit the company image. And Amara, the one woman who had made him feel human outside the boardroom, had been erased with the same cold efficiency as a line item on a spreadsheet. Necessary for who? Ethan asked, his voice low enough to make the room lean closer. Vivian finally turned to him, and there was no apology in her expression. Only conviction. For you. For Cole Holdings. Your father had just died. The board was circling. A scandal involving an unplanned child with a woman outside our world would have destroyed everything. Amara's eyes narrowed, but her voice remained calm. Outside your world. She repeated the phrase with quiet disbelief. I was not outside his world. I was the woman he loved. For the first time, Ethan saw something flicker across Vivian's face that looked almost like discomfort. Not guilt. Pride wounded by exposure. Noah shifted in his seat, gray eyes moving between the adults who had defined his existence through choices he never made. Mom told me my dad used to laugh when it rained, he said softly, his child's voice slicing through the legal tension with heartbreaking innocence. She said rain made him stop thinking about work. Ethan's throat tightened so fast it hurt. That was true. Rain had always been the one thing that quieted the noise of numbers and acquisitions in his mind. Amara had known that from the first night they got caught in a storm outside her apartment, sharing a paper cup of coffee under a deli awning at 1 a.m. The memory rose now with painful clarity, not as romance, but as proof of everything his mother had taken. Judge Holloway leaned forward. This court will recess for 20 minutes before hearing the custody recommendation. The gavel struck once, sharp and final, but no one moved right away. Ethan stepped away from the defense table, not toward his mother, but toward Noah. The boy looked up, his expression guarded in a way no 8-year-old should ever need to be. Ethan lowered himself until they were nearly eye level, his expensive suit pressing against the polished floor without hesitation. I should have known, he said, voice rough with a grief too large to hide. I should have found you. Noah studied him carefully, the way children do when deciding whether an adult's words deserve trust. Mom said you did not know, he answered. She said it was not your fault. Ethan's eyes flicked to Amara, and the quiet grace in that single mercy nearly broke him. After everything, she had protected not just Noah, but the memory of the man Ethan had once been before family loyalty became blindness. Behind him, Vivian's chair scraped softly as she stood, but Ethan did not turn around. For the first time in his life, his mother's movements no longer commanded his attention. The only thing that mattered sat in front of him in a navy blazer and gray eyes, waiting without expectation. Noah hesitated, then asked the question that emptied the room of every other sound. If you did not know about me, why are you here now? Ethan swallowed hard, every answer in his world narrowing into one truth. Because now that I know, I am not leaving this courtroom without fighting for the time we lost. And across the aisle, Amara watched in silence. Not softened, not convinced, but no longer looking at him like a stranger. The real trial, Ethan understood, was only beginning. When the courtroom doors opened again after recess, the air had changed. The whispers were lower now, sharper, shaped by the kind of truth that had already escaped the room and was spreading through every newsroom in Manhattan. Ethan returned to his seat at the plaintiff's side, not beside his mother, but one chair closer to Amara and Noah. It was a small movement, barely noticeable to anyone else, yet it carried the weight of a decision he had never imagined making. Vivian Cole remained across the aisle, posture flawless, though the stillness around her now felt less like power and more like isolation. Judge Holloway resumed the bench with a stack of custody evaluations in front of him. This hearing will now focus on the best interest of the child, he said, his tone steady enough to quiet the room. The court recognizes Mr. Cole's paternity and the documented concealment that prevented prior involvement. Ethan felt the words settle into him like both blessing and accusation. Recognition. A father-in-law, but not yet in life. The distinction cut deeper than any public scandal ever could. The child advocate, A silver-haired woman with rimless glasses named Judith Mercer rose from the side table. She had spent the recess speaking privately with Noah and Chambers, away from the cameras and legal language. Her voice carried a softness that somehow made the stakes feel even sharper. Noah is emotionally secure, highly perceptive, and deeply bonded to his mother. He does not fear Mr. Cole. However, he does not yet trust the permanence of adults who enter his world late. Ethan lowered his eyes for a moment. He deserved that truth. Every second of it. Amara sat with her hands folded neatly over the folder that had dismantled the last 8 years of lies. She had not looked at Ethan once during recess, yet her silence no longer felt like distance. It felt like observation, like she was measuring whether the man beside her was worthy of the boy who carried his face. Judge Holloway nodded toward Noah. I would like the child to speak once more, if he is comfortable. Noah stood slowly, blazer straight, chin lifted with that same quiet resolve Ethan had spent a lifetime perfecting in boardrooms. But on Noah it looked different. Smaller, sadder, more earned. The microphone was adjusted lower, and the room waited. Noah, the judge said gently, if this court allows your father visitation and a path toward shared custody, what would make you feel safe? The question seemed too large for a child, yet Noah answered without hesitation. If he keeps showing up. The simplicity of it hollowed Ethan out. No demands, no anger, just consistency. The one thing money could never buy back. Noah glanced at Ethan, gray eyes steady. I do not need presents. I just need to know he is real. Somewhere behind them, a reporter quietly lowered her tablet, as if even the press understood this moment belonged to something more human than headlines. Ethan's voice came low, controlled only by effort. I will show up. He did not speak to the judge. He spoke directly to Noah. Every school recital, every soccer game, every science fair, every night you want me there. I will be there. Noah searched his face with the same solemn caution that had become second nature to him. Then he gave a small nod, not acceptance, but the first opening. Across the aisle, Vivian finally spoke, her voice cool and edged with disbelief. You are willing to jeopardize the company over this. Ethan turned toward her slowly, and for the first time there was no son left in his expression. Only a father. The company survived without my son, he said. I will not survive another year without him. The words stunned the room into silence. Amara's gaze shifted then, resting on Ethan with something new beneath the caution. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the first fracture in the wall she had every right to build. Judge Holloway reviewed the file before him, then set it aside with deliberate care. The court grants immediate supervised visitation, 3 evenings per week, pending a full custody review in 60 days. Mrs. Cole is ordered to have no unsupervised contact with the child until further notice. Vivian's breath caught sharply, the first real crack in the image she had worn like armor. But Ethan barely registered it. Noah had turned toward Amara, and after receiving the smallest nod from her, he stepped down from the witness stand and crossed the polished floor toward Ethan. It was only 12 feet, but to Ethan it felt like the longest and most sacred distance ever measured. When Noah finally stopped in front of him, he did not speak right away. He simply reached out and touched Ethan's hand, small fingers curling around one knuckle, as if testing whether this man could truly stay. And in that single quiet touch, Ethan understood that fatherhood would not begin with a court order. It would begin with earning the trust of the little boy brave enough to ask only for presents. The courthouse steps were slick with late afternoon rain when Ethan walked out beside Noah for the first time. The city moved around them in a blur of black umbrellas, yellow cabs, and flashing cameras held behind the barricades, but the world had narrowed to the small hand still wrapped around his finger. Noah's grip was light, cautious, as if he was still deciding whether this new reality would disappear the moment he blinked. Ethan slowed his pace to match the boy's shorter stride, each marble step suddenly more important than any boardroom floor he had ever crossed. Amara walked on Noah's other side, her navy coat buttoned high against the chill, eyes scanning the crowd with the quiet vigilance of a mother who had spent 8 years protecting one truth. At the curb, Ethan's driver stepped forward and opened the back door of the sedan, but Noah hesitated. His gray eyes lifted toward Ethan with a seriousness that never seemed to leave him. Are you really coming on Wednesday? He asked. The question was soft, almost swallowed by the rain, yet it hit harder than the judge's ruling. Wednesday, their first court-ordered dinner. Just 2 hours at a small restaurant on the Upper West Side with a family counselor nearby. Ethan crouched slightly, so they were eye level again. "I will be there 15 minutes early," he said. "And if you want, I can bring that chocolate cake from the bakery on Madison Avenue. The one your mom used to love." For the first time, something shifted in Noah's expression. Not a smile, not yet, but the smallest spark of surprise. He turned to Amara. "You told him about that?" Amara's gaze lingered on Ethan for a beat longer than usual. "No," she said quietly. He remembered. The answer hung in the cold air between them, carrying more weight than either of them intended. Because remembering was its own kind of proof. Not just that Ethan had once loved her, but that the man beneath the company image still existed somewhere beneath the years of control and silence. Noah nodded slowly, then climbed into the back seat. Before the driver closed the door, he looked back at Ethan once more. "Then I will believe you on Wednesday." The sedan pulled away, taillights disappearing into the rain-slick Manhattan traffic, and Ethan remained on the curb long after the car vanished. Beside him, Amara adjusted the strap of her leather bag, preparing to leave, but Ethan's voice stopped her. "Why did you let him come to me just now?" She turned, rain catching in the curls near her temple, her expression unreadable but no longer distant. "Because Noah has spent his whole life learning how to survive disappointment," she said. "I need to know whether you are going to teach him trust or teach him more of the same." The honesty in her words landed with brutal grace. No accusation, no dramatics, just a mother naming the stakes. Ethan exhaled slowly, the city noise fading beneath the clarity of her truth. "I cannot undo 8 years," he said, "but I can make sure the next 8 look different." For the first time since the hearing began, Amara's face softened, not into forgiveness, but into recognition. She saw that he finally understood what fatherhood required. Not grand gestures, not money, time, consistency, presence. "Then start with Wednesday," she said, stepping toward the waiting town car. Noah does not care about promises. He notices patterns. As her car door closed and she disappeared into traffic, Ethan stood alone beneath the courthouse lights, the rain dampening his tailored coat and flattening the city into reflections. His phone buzzed in his pocket almost immediately. Marcus, his chief of staff. The screen flashed with 6 missed calls from the board. Another headline was already moving through financial media. Coal air revealed in courtroom custody shock. Ethan stared at the glowing screen for a long moment before silencing it. For years he had answered every crisis within seconds. Every merger risk, every public relations fire, every investor panic. But tonight there was only one date that mattered. Wednesday, 6 o'clock, Upper West Side. He looked up at the rain falling through the courthouse lights and thought of Noah's voice asking the simplest, most devastating question. "Are you really coming?" In the world Ethan had built, trust had always been negotiated through contracts and signatures. But with his son, it would begin with something far smaller and infinitely harder. A chair at dinner that could not stay empty. As he stepped toward his waiting car, Ethan made the first decision that belonged not to Cole Holdings, not to Vivian, not to the board, but to the man he was trying to become. He called his assistant and canceled every meeting on Wednesday afternoon. Then he added one final instruction in a voice steadier than he felt. "Find out Noah's favorite science topic before 6. If I am showing up, I am showing up prepared." And somewhere across the city, in the back seat beside his mother, Noah sat quietly watching rain race down the window, wondering if this time an adult's promise might finally survive the storm. Wednesday arrived wrapped in a soft Manhattan drizzle, the kind of rain that turned the Upper West Side sidewalks into silver ribbons beneath the streetlights. Ethan was already seated in the corner booth at 6:15, exactly as promised, though in truth he had arrived at 5:40. The small Italian restaurant glowed with amber light. Warm bread scented the air, and a single slice of chocolate cake waited untouched at the center of the table. Beside it sat a neatly wrapped rectangular box no larger than a hardcover novel. Inside was a beginner astronomy kit, complete with a pocket star chart and a brass compass, because Marcus had quietly learned that Noah's favorite subject was space. Ethan had spent the last hour reading about Jupiter's moons on his phone, not because he needed the knowledge, but because he wanted Noah to feel seen in the details. At precisely 6 o'clock, The front bell chimed. Ethan looked up so fast his breath caught. Noah stepped inside beside Amara, his navy sweater still dotted with tiny raindrops, gray eyes immediately scanning the room until they landed on Ethan. The boy stopped for one heartbeat, as if measuring the reality of the promise against the memory of every adult who had failed one before. Then he walked forward. "You came early," Noah said, climbing into the booth across from him. Ethan let out the smallest smile. "I figured stars deserved extra time." Noah's expression shifted, cautious curiosity overtaking the reserve he wore like armor. Amara slid into the seat beside him, not to supervise, but close enough to remind them both that trust was still under construction. A family counselor sat 2 tables away, discreet enough to disappear into the background, exactly as the court required. For the first few minutes, the conversation moved carefully. School, math scores, Noah's science fair project about planetary orbits. But then Ethan reached for the small box and slid it across the table. "I heard you like astronomy," he said. Noah opened it slowly, his fingers careful with the wrapping paper, and when he saw the brass compass and star chart, the first real smile finally broke across his face. It was not wide, not dramatic, but it transformed him so completely Ethan felt the room tilt. It was his own smile reflected back in a smaller, brighter form. "This is for finding constellations?" Noah asked. Ethan nodded. "And for reminding us that sometimes the most important things are there even when we cannot see them right away." The words carried more meaning than the gift itself, and Amara's gaze lifted briefly, catching the truth inside what he had not said. Dinner came and went in slow, steady conversation. Noah spoke about Saturn's rings and why he thought Mars was overrated. Ethan listened the way he had never listened in any boardroom, with complete attention, no screen glowing beside his plate, no phone interruptions, no assistant whispering urgent updates. The city could wait. At one point Noah paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "Did you ever want kids?" The question landed gently, but Ethan answered with the honesty it deserved. "I wanted a life that meant something outside work," he said. "I just did not realize that life had already started without me." Noah considered that in silence, then nodded as if storing the answer away for later. When dessert arrived, Ethan cut the first forkful of chocolate cake and slid the plate toward Noah. The boy laughed softly. "Mom really did tell you my favorite." Amara shook her head. "No, I did not." Noah looked between them, understanding dawning in his eyes. Ethan remembered. Not from a file. Not from research. From the rainy night 8 years ago when Amara had confessed over cake and coffee that chocolate was the one flavor that made any bad day survivable. The realization seemed to settle something small but important inside Noah. By the time they stepped back onto the sidewalk, the rain had stopped and the pavement shimmered under the city lights. Noah stood close to Ethan, astronomy kit tucked under one arm. "I had fun," he said, the words simple enough to break open everything Ethan had spent years locking down. Ethan exhaled slowly, afraid to disturb the moment with too much need. "Can I see your science fair project this weekend?" Noah looked up at Amara first. She studied Ethan for a long beat, measuring not his words but the pattern beginning to form. Then she gave the slightest nod. Noah turned back, and this time there was no hesitation in his voice. "Yes, Saturday at 3. Do not be late." Ethan smiled, deeper now, steadier. "I will be there at 2:45. As Amara and Noah walked toward their car, the boy glanced back once and lifted the small brass compass in a silent gesture that somehow felt bigger than any legal document signed in court. Ethan remained on the sidewalk long after they drove away, the city glowing around him, realizing that trust was not rebuilt in speeches or grand apologies. It was rebuilt in arrival times, remembered details, and a child beginning to smile over chocolate cake and constellations. Saturday arrived bright and clear, the kind of crisp New York afternoon that made the Hudson shimmer like brushed silver beyond the school windows. Ethan stood outside Street Matthew Academy at 2:40, 15 minutes earlier than promised, a rolled architectural poster tucked beneath one arm and a paper bag from the same Madison Avenue bakery in his other hand. The science fair banners fluttered near the entrance, and parents moved through the halls carrying flowers, cameras, and the low hum of proud anticipation. For years, Ethan had walked into skyscrapers where his name opened doors before he touched them. Today he stepped into a middle school gymnasium where none of that mattered. Here, only one person's opinion could let him in. The gym was alive with bright trifold boards, string lights, and children in pressed uniforms explaining volcanoes, robotics, and weather systems to clusters of smiling adults. Ethan scanned the rows until he saw Noah standing beside a display titled Mapping the Night Sky over Manhattan. The board was covered in hand-drawn constellations, lunar phases, and a precise model of Jupiter with its 4 largest moons labeled in careful silver marker. Noah looked up at the exact moment Ethan entered, and the boy's entire face lit with something so open and unguarded it nearly stopped Ethan in place. "You are early again," Noah said, a note of pleased disbelief in his voice. Ethan held up the bakery bag. "I figured galaxies. Deserve cookies this time." Noah laughed softly, then motioned him closer with a confidence that felt new. Amara stood a few feet away in a cream coat, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, watching the exchange with a stillness that had become less defensive over the past week. The family counselor was absent today. This was no longer about legal supervision. It was about pattern becoming trust. Noah launched into his presentation with a seriousness that mirrored Ethan in every pitch meeting. But where Ethan had once spoken in numbers and projections, Noah spoke in stars. "The city lights make it harder to see smaller constellations," he explained, pointing to a map of the Upper West Side skyline. "But if you know where to look, the major stars still form the same shapes. They never stop being there." Ethan listened with complete focus, the words landing as both science and metaphor. Amara's eyes met his for the briefest second, and in that shared silence they both understood the deeper truth inside Noah's project. Some things remain even when hidden by glare and distance. At the end of the row, the principal stepped forward with a clipboard and a smile. "First place in astronomy goes to Noah Brooks." Applause rippled through the gym. Noah froze for one stunned heartbeat before turning instinctively, not first to his mother, but to Ethan. The look in his eyes was not caution anymore. It was invitation. Ethan stepped forward and knelt so Noah could throw his arms around him without reaching. The hug was quick, almost shy, but it carried more force than any public victory Ethan had ever known. He wrapped one arm around the boy carefully, feeling the weight of trust becoming real. "I knew you would win," Ethan said quietly. Noah pulled back, gray eyes bright. "How?" Ethan smiled. "Because you notice what other people miss." The answer made Noah grin in a way that was undeniably Ethan's. Later, as the crowd thinned and parents began folding chairs, Amara approached him near the bleachers. Her voice stayed low, private beneath the echo of the gym. "He has been talking about today since Wednesday night," she said. "He even laid out his blazer before bed." Ethan looked across the room where Noah was showing his medal to another student, his excitement too big to contain. "I almost missed this," Ethan said the truth.